I am the Program Development Associate for Rush Education and Career Hub, and I'm going to be navigating or facilitating this panel for today. We're going to be here for about 45 minutes. So if you have any questions that you may have, please make sure that you drop them in the chat so that way we can see them at the end. Please, students, keep yourselves on mute if you could, and then please put your questions in the chat if you have any. Um, or in the Q&A. The Q&A would be the best place to go, so that way I can highlight the ones that are like the best questions to go. I'm going to go ahead and do a short bio um, uh, for the panelists, or at least provide their positions or their skill sets that we have here. If you click anywhere else in the app, please remember that clicking anywhere else in the app is going to kick you out of the session. So if you want to stay in this panel, please make sure you kind of stay where we are without going to zooming over to other areas. But I definitely want us to get started really soon. If you have any questions about housekeeping, please let me know. Other than that, I just want to make sure we're all good to go. Let me make sure that we are, let me exit full screen, make sure I can see the Q&A. Okay, perfect. And then we're also going to give people a chance to get in this session. All right. So let me, there we go. Got a review so I can kind of see that. All right. And just want to give some time for individuals to kind of get in here and join us. Welcome. I just saw a couple of you in our other session. Thank you for joining us again. Awesome. And yes, please drop your questions in the Q&A section. Thank you, April. Awesome. Okay. So how we are going to do this is I'm going to introduce our guest speakers and provide you a little background, and then I'm going to ask them 2 questions that they can answer for us. And then when they answer those questions, I'll move on to the next guest speaker for today and continue on from there until we have all our guest speakers who have answered their 2 questions. At the end, I will ask them all to share a question. So they will have all 1 question to share. And then for those of you who have any questions for yourself to ask any of the guest speakers, we will then go to the Q&A session. I will ask those by popularity or by pinning that April would do for us. All right. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A as soon as you feel it's necessary. All right. And y'all gonna have to excuse me if I slander y'all names. I'm not always good with it. So correct me always. Okay. So first off, we are going to start with Nadine Lerret. Yes. I did it right. Okay. So Nadine is an associate professor and program director in the Department of Medical Laboratory Science at Rush University Medical Center, which is where I am. Thank you for joining us, Nadine. And so my first question that I have for you is that I understand you are originally intended to go to medical school to become a pediatrician. And so what led you to medical laboratory science instead?
Thank you, Nia, for rocking out my name, everything. So I had this fabulous plan. Yes, let's be a doctor. Let's be a pediatrician. I did a lot of babysitting and thought kids are great, right? And then I decided to go into medical laboratory science as an undergrad in order to just essentially boost my application for medical school. I thought, like, what is a degree that could get me into medical school? This has medical in the name. I was in high school and I chose it, so why not? So I did my undergrad in it, but you had to do a phlebotomy rotation, which is where you draw blood from patients, right? And it's required. And so we had to go to the floors and we had to draw patients, and we had to draw cancer patients, and we had to draw babies. And I realized that working with patients was something that I just couldn't do on a daily basis without taking my work home with me every single night and basically crying. So drawing blood from a little baby, you're putting a needle in them and they were just born 3 days ago. And even the people who were really good at it and that was their job and they were supposed to be there, the parents still freaked out, rightly so. And I just quickly thought, this is not something I could do for the rest of my life. I'm barely getting through this 3-week rotation I have to do for school. So that was the start of my senior year in undergrad. And I had a total freak out moment of what am I going to do with my life? Because here was my plan since like junior year of high school, and it was derailed. But the cool thing was my undergrad was medical lab science. So there were jobs waiting for me right when I graduated. So I had never planned on being a medical laboratory scientist. I was going to go to med school, but instead I jumped into that field, thinking like, I'll figure it out while I work, right? And then ended up loving it because it's in the lab and it's hands-on and it's science. And so if you like med school, and there's the diseases and cases to solve, medical lab science was the same. I just was in the lab solving these cases, not working with patients and looking at their symptoms to solve the cases. So I grew to love it. And then from there realized there was a lot more I could do with a medical lab science degree. So that's when I kind of jumped in and furthered my career.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And that is something to take that a lot of students, they want to go with those kids. They want to go with those babies, especially our young ladies. Okay. I want y'all to take those motherly instincts and really think about this before you get into it. Because that is your motherly instincts going into full just spectrum. I want to work with the kids.
Right.
You don't know until you know. You don't know until you know. All right. So I appreciate that. And then my next question for you is, can you describe what a medical microbiologist does and talk a little bit about the demands for those positions and opportunities to advance in the position?
Yeah. So I was working as medical laboratory science, but you have within medical laboratory science, there's about 7 different disciplines that your 1 degree allows you to work in right after graduation. So medical microbiology is one of them, and it's often the most sought after, but you also have blood banking, chemistry, hematology, immunology, and then like transplant and organ donation and organ typing. So you have these different disciplines and you can work in any of them. And I chose medical micro just because I loved cases and kind of the detective work of all of it. One thing that people don't know is you go to a physician, right? And let's say even if you just have like strep throat or a wound that's not healing properly and you think it's infected. So you go to the physician, they maybe take a swab of your throat or the wound and then they send it for culture. And they maybe say like, yes or no, it's strep. Here's a prescription for an antibiotic. Well, it's actually the lab who tells the physician which antibiotic to give you. So the physician may know, penicillin, amoxicillin, they're really common and they're okay for like a first time case. But if someone has something more serious or something that penicillin is not able to treat, it's the lab that works up the organism and says to the physician, this is what would kill this organism. Like this is what it is susceptible to. So you do that in the micro laboratory in a clinical hospital or in a hospital. You as a medical microbiologist with just your MLS degree, you work up the bug and you diagnose the disease, and then you tell the physician what antibiotic to use. So essentially you are doing everything, but the physician's at the front line with the patient saying, this is what it is, this is the antibiotic you take, here's your prescription, but they can't do that without you as the medical microbiologist. So that was the part that I thought was just so cool. And then the great thing about medical lab science, like I said, there's all those different areas of the lab or of the hospital that you could work in just immediately with your degree. There are so many positions. So our students, we can't say we guarantee you a job after graduation legally, but we can guarantee you'll have a job after graduation under the table, because essentially every single one of our students gets a job right after graduation, because there are so many openings in this field, mainly because a lot of people don't know about it. And also there's a lot of people retiring. So it just creates this demand that we can't keep up with. So for the last, I've been at Rush for 5 or 6 years, and there hasn't been a year where the graduates haven't been completely placed in their jobs before graduation. So they even have jobs lined up before they graduate. And some of them actually do choose to go on to med school or PA school or vet school or some sort of professional degree after MLS. And so for those, I'm not counting them as getting jobs, but they also do go on to what they want to do. Maybe it's not immediate. Maybe they need one more year of experience or something before they officially get into med school or PA school. But everyone, it works out. It works out. Sometimes they also do what happened to me and realize like, oh, patients aren't for me. Like phlebotomy is not my thing. I'm not going to use this as a stepping stone to med school. But yeah, the cool thing is there's a lot of different jobs, and then you don't have to just work in a hospital. So there, you need medical lab scientists in things like a fertility clinic. There has to be a medical lab scientist running every single test to work up the fertility panel for the patient. So for them to say, here's what's working and not working, and here's how we can create a baby, there's a medical lab scientist running all of the blood work. Or if with medical micro, you could go on to like food safety testing. So when they say like, there's a recall with lettuce, it's Listeria or Salmonella, it's a medical microbiologist running the sample on the lettuce to say, here's what bacteria is on the lettuce. So there's a lot you can do if a clinical hospital is not your end game.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome. I really like that. That is so nice. All right. So we're going to go ahead and go into our next guest speaker. And correct me if I'm wrong, Cotis Mitchell?
Cotis Mitchell. Pretty
Cotis.
close.
I get almost. All right. So he is an administrative fellow at UI Health. And my first question for you is, you transitioned into healthcare from a different career field. Can you share a little bit about why you became interested in healthcare and how UI Health volunteer program helped you with exploring these different options?
Sure. So I would say early high school, I was interested in becoming a doctor, and I had the opportunity to participate in the National Youth Leadership Forum on Medicine, which allowed me some exposure to, positions in the field, their career pathways, what that journey was like going through college and learning more about like med school, then residencies, and then fellowships before you become like a full-fledged attending. I think it was at that point that I was like, I don't know that I want to go through all that schooling. So I started looking at other fields. And so I ended up choosing chemical engineering because I really liked chemistry back in high school. And so I did full four-year program at Stanford and then a master's program at Georgia Tech. I started working for a railroad for about a year and a half in operations. And that was a really great experience in terms of, I guess, getting some more management experience, leading teams, being on the ground with folks. But I realized I didn't quite have the work-life balance I was looking for either. So I ended up leaving that job and I was in Atlanta at the time. I came back to Chicago and was like, well, I'm still interested in medicine. I just don't know what I want to do. And I was like, well, let me just go ahead and volunteer. And that's how I got introduced to the UI Health Volunteer Program. I wanted a program that was really flexible, and they just required that you do 8 hours per month. And so you could really be flexible in terms of like how you split that up. If you want to do that like 2 hours a week, or if you want to do just 8 hours in one day, you have total flexibility. And I kind of needed that at the time, just because of like what was going on in the family situation. So I really enjoyed that flexibility. The volunteer program also allowed me to work with people in human resources, interact with people at the top levels of the organization, just because volunteers are everywhere and they're visible, and you never know when the CEO is going to walk by, or someone at the director levels are just going to be in the room and you'll be there and have a chance to interact. And so it was shortly after I started volunteering and like with human resources that they had a position open up. They encouraged me to apply. I did. I eventually got it. And then a few months after that, I got a full-time position with volunteer services, which has allowed me to since go on to business school. And I just graduated, and then now I'm in my fellowship. And so, I found a different route through healthcare, kind of stumbled my way into it. But I really enjoy the path that I'm on now. And I feel like the skill sets I have from my engineering degrees and then my work experience have all kind of built up to a point where I can contribute at the highest levels of my organization as an administrative fellow.
Absolutely. And I feel like you answered a little bit of our second question, but I also want to ask you, where do you hope your fellowship experience will lead you?
Sure. So yeah, for those who may not know, an administrative fellowship it allows people like me, fellows, to get exposure and learn from the top levels of the organization. So I report directly to our CEO. I'm in the C-suite with our other chiefs, so chief medical officer, chief nursing officer. And so when they have opportunities, when they have projects that are coming up, they look to the fellows and they say, can you help me implement this? Can you do some more research on this? And then you kind of become a project lead. So you get the opportunity to, work directly with people who are trying to make changes throughout the entire organization, throughout not only our hospital, but our outpatient clinics and our offsite clinics. And, whether it's department-wide or entire system-wide, you get to have a hand and get seen and be visible. And so that is allowing me to kind of explore what my future career path will look like. I'm currently doing a lot of work. We recently appointed a chief diversity and community health equity officer. And so I'm actually helping her with kind of getting her department up and running, and kind of figuring out the scope of, a lot of the programs that we want to get started. And so that's a unique opportunity that, just happened to come up while I was in my fellowship. And I think having spent the past few months helping her, and being a part of like her process, I think I do want to continue with her for a few more years after my fellowship, gain some more experience in the field of diversity and health equity. And I think long term, I do want to find myself in the C-suite. So I don't quite know exactly which role, but I know I do want to be making those decisions at the top level of the organization, and affecting change and driving, equity and diversity, and kind of being that face, that voice, that example for the entire hospital and clinics.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Thank
All
you.
right, so we're going to go ahead and go to our last panelist. And so we have Chantelle Shackleford. Yes, I
Yes,
got it
yes.
right. Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Just got to keep it going. Got to keep it going.
Three for
Oh, I got to
three.
bring it back. Got to bring it back. All right. And she's the manager for advertising and promotional labeling at AbbVie Biomedicals. All right.
Biopharmaceuticals.
Biopharmaceuticals, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Biopharmaceuticals. I'm over here just all over the place with medical. And so my first question for you is that I understand that when you were in school, you were planning to become a physician. How did you learn about the pharmaceutical industry, and why did you decide to follow that path instead?
So thank you guys for having me to come and join the panelists here. They did a phenomenal job. So I did wanted to be a doctor. My undergrad degree was in chemistry, and I ended up at a post-bac program. And in that time, I was just wondering, like, do I really want to do this? The time commitment takes a lot of discipline. Take a discipline to be successful in anything. And during that time, I ended up working for Abbott Labs, and which is a healthcare company, and it's really like the parent company where I'm at. And I took a temp job there, right? I had no idea, because my mind was physician, hands-on with the patients, right? So I didn't know what I could do if I did not go to medical school. So by me going in and start to temp there with them, and eventually I got hired on, I learned a whole world about healthcare from a different perspective. Taking my degree and, thinking about Nadine, is she in the lab testing? Well, one of my first jobs was that I'm the person from a quality perspective was approving reagents that they could use to test with, even the equipment, some of the testing equipment. So as an auditor, and I have got into management, but I was able to test, the material. I was in the lab, then I went, into the office as an auditor. And I was like, this is a whole nother world. And I'm still have impact on patients, right? And how our therapeutics run, from the R&D perspective to actually now I am on the promotional side for regulatory. So all the commercials you see, you're watching your favorite show, then here come a commercial about a new therapeutic. That's what I do. I make sure that it is in alignment with all of our regulations, and I love it. I really do. I really do. I love working in this environment.
I love it. I love that passion behind it. And I think you spoke a little bit to this, but can you talk a little bit more? Many people who pursue healthcare imagine themselves working directly with patients as nurses and doctors do. What do you find fulfilling about your work in non-patient facing roles?
So let me say first is that the whole core of our business is the patient comes first. So I might not see a patient physically, but behind everything I do is a patient. I do what I do because of the patient. So, right now I'm working on a product, and I'm seeing patients enroll. So I see a person with a disease. I know that behind that, I was helping responsible for getting a therapeutic, out to a particular patient. And that really, really excites me, right? Because we need therapeutics for the diseases that our communities are faced with. And we need to be able to take, the people like myself that have a background in science to be able to take it and translate it into the business arena, translate it into the pharmaceutical role. You don't necessarily have to go to the lab. Nadine says she loves the lab, right? And she's able to take her background and go to the lab, right? And from my perspective, I'm able to take my science background and to be able to interpret data. I've worked on clinical trials. I worked on so many new products that are brought to the market. And every time you get an approval for a product, although it takes that hard work, I think about at the end of the day, there's a patient that a physician is writing a prescription for. It's because of the work that we do every day.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for that. And then my last question for all of you, if anyone wants to answer before we get into Q&A questions, is what advice would you like to share with the students listening as they begin their careers in healthcare, both clinical and non-clinical?
So I'll be the first, is that the first thing I would tell any student, I tell students all the time because I mentor a lot of students, is number one, do what is your passion, right? Do that you can see yourself doing without a struggle. Now, I'm not saying everything, like I said, my first thing I said was success equals discipline. You can't do anything unless you're disciplined about it. But I would say find out what you're passionate about and then put everything you have behind that passion. And even when you have detours, or you might have to take that turn, how we on the expressway and they'd be like, you got to deviate here. That's going to happen in life, right? But you always got to surround yourself with a network of people that's going to help you. Number one, you got to have a sponsor, somebody who has a seat at the table that's going to bring your name up and speak on your behalf. You need a mentor, the person that's going to kind of take you through those rough edges and those good spots to kind of help mold you. You have to have people, a support team that's in your corner, that's going to help you to get to that next level. So my advice to the students, number one, do your dream, fulfill your dream. Do not live in regrets. Number two, make sure you get a network that's going to help you. And I already told April, you guys have my information even after here. Feel free to contact me. We can have a little bit more, conversation if you want to the students. But that's what I would say. That's my advice.
I can jump in. I think it's important to embrace the journey a little bit. So just like Chantel was saying, it doesn't always go well and there's detours. And sometimes those detours are for the better. And sometimes they show you, like a path that you wouldn't have thought of. And a lot of you are doing the work, you're already here, kind of like looking for alternative paths. So you've already embraced that battle a little bit. But I think kind of saying, okay, this was a step back and this did not go as I planned, but what can I do with this now to then move forward? And sometimes it moves you forward, exponentially to where you wouldn't have even thought in the first place. And that's where coming to things like this, you may get information from people that'll spark your, process or 2 years from now, you might think of like, I was part of this talk and someone mentioned this, and you can just put in the time and the research to try to jump on those alternative angles a little bit and fuel your passion.
Yeah, and then I'll kind of piggyback off of Chantelle and Nadine. I would say don't be afraid to do something different. I can speak from my own experience, having 2 degrees in chemical engineering. Sometimes my mom is bewildered that I'm not in that field. And so like we face those pressures of like, whether it's our friends who graduated with us or like our family who's so proud of us for having accomplished this one thing. When I came to a point where I decided to pivot, I had to be confident in that decision and not feel like I had failed in some way. Understand that like the experiences that I had gained were actually going to help make me a better person in this new field that I do have a passion for. And so at some point, you guys are all young. You may decide to go into a field that ultimately is not your forever career. And so don't be afraid to reflect at some point. And if you determine that like I think I'd be better if I did something in a different arena, but that's a bad thing. Follow your passions and don't be afraid if it's not what you thought it was earlier in life. As we grow older, we change, we grow into different people. So be open and kind of embrace that and understand like the experiences you gain at this young point in your life as you're going into college or as you're graduating from college really do build upon themselves and allow you to do even bigger and better things. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you all. And also, we have a question for you as well. In the Q&A about the administrative fellowships, they asked, do folks generally have a grad degree to apply for a program like that? Or what is the preparation for someone who wants to apply to this type of program?
Sure. So for administrative fellowships, the short answer is yes. Typical graduate degrees for administrative fellowships are a master in healthcare administration, a master in hospital administration. I have a master's in business administration. So these are professional degrees that set you up. You can also do a master's of public health, and there are a couple others, but they're typically either healthcare oriented or business oriented, because a lot of what you'd be doing in a fellowship is centered around healthcare, but also includes policy and finance and operations. And so having a graduate degree in those fields prepares you pretty well. There are also opportunities for you to do internships during those graduate programs. And so some people were administrative interns and then applied to be administrative fellows. And the fellows, I guess, for further background, a fellowship is a full-time position. And so you are hired, you finish your graduate program, and my program is 1 year long. Some are up to 2 years long. And so it's something you do after you graduate, but you apply for while you're still in graduate school. And so it's, you will, if you're in an MHA program, which is a master's in healthcare administration, you'll hear about those. I happened to learn about the administrative fellowship because I was already working at UI Health in the volunteer program. And I had actually, part of like my exposure as a volunteer was meeting some of the administrative fellows while I was working there. And so that's how I learned about this program in particular. But yes, a graduate degree is required generally for an administrative fellowship. I will also say Chicago is a pretty rich healthcare market. So there are lots of fellowship locations in the Chicagoland area. So there's a lot to kind of choose from.
Awesome. You have many thanks in the chat. If you have any more questions, please make sure you put them in the Q&A. Definitely want to make sure we answer any of the questions that you may have, or you can also come on voice and ask your questions personally if you want to take yourself off mute. If not, I have some questions that I can ask for the entire group. I'm gonna give them a chance to. Okay, all right. I got some questions, don't worry, we got some time. So we still got about 15 minutes or so. And so I would love for you all, is there an aspect in your field that you hope to see a change in? And what change would you like to see in your area of healthcare?
Can I jump in on this? So the lab, some people don't know this, we're very much in charge of reference ranges for test analytes at individual hospitals. So there's certain tests that you go to the lab and you get run, and the reference range is kind of nationwide. Think of like a glucose test. If you have diabetes, you get a glucose test. That reference range to say whether or not it's high or it's healthy, that's pretty much standard across the board. Hospitals and labs don't have a lot of say in that. But there are many, many other analytes that the labs have, like they're the ones that determine the cutoff values with the physicians. They work hand in hand. And one thing that there's been a lot of push for verbally, but not physically, is to get transgender reference ranges established for just start small and go, local hospitals and then branch nationwide, because so many of our reference ranges are male or female, and there's no gray area in between, but there needs to be a gray area in between. So that's one thing where I hope that the action turns out to be more than just talk about it. I personally do a little bit of research in it, but there needs to be a lot more of a collective angle. But it's something that, any medical lab scientist could take part in helping establish these reference ranges.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to answer the question about an aspect in your field that you hope to see a change in, and what that change would be?
I think for me, I want to see equity in healthcare. And I mean, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And so this has highlighted some things which some of us already knew that was taking place in regards to healthcare. So I would like to see, as far as like the pharmaceutical industry, taking a role at a different level on making sure we have equity in healthcare. I mean, making sure that our clinical trials that we're doing across the globe, that it's reflecting the population truly, so we can do preventative medicine, but we need to make sure that we're having therapeutics brought to the market that's going to meet the needs of the community.
Thank you so much.
And then I will actually, I guess I'm Mr. Piggyback today. I'll piggyback off of Chantel in that I've noticed that executive leadership teams in the healthcare field do not always reflect the populations that they serve. And so oftentimes in healthcare organizations, the frontline staff are fairly diverse. Maybe some mid-level management is fairly diverse. When you get to like the people at the very top who make the decisions, they don't always reflect that as well. And so I feel studies have shown that, as you have more diverse people in those positions, you're able to take in new viewpoints and have more consideration for things that may not be considered at the current state. And so I think it's important that systems take a look at their own diversity and kind of address why is it that, we have diversity within our organization, but it doesn't always make itself to the very top. And how can we go about addressing that for the improvement of our own patients?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, this is my chance to give anyone a chance to put their questions in the Q&A. And Chantel, I believe you have thanks in the chat for Melissa. Thank you so much, Melissa, for providing your feedback on the answers that they have provided. Thank you. And if there's no questions, I believe we still have some time for a couple more questions that I may have. And so my next question for you all is, what's the most surprising or unexpected thing you've kind of learned or learned about, being in your field?
I guess something unexpected in my particular field that I've learned over the years, because I've had different aspect of pharma that I've been in with the same company though, is I guess it's understanding the dynamics of how the pharmaceutical role plays in healthcare. Like I said, Abbott it was a spinoff from Abbott, and I just learned that, wow, again, I didn't know, and I just, I was able to learn that the pharmaceutical industry really impacts the healthcare in a way that I did not know before I really became, hired at the company and started getting involved in different roles. So again, I was thinking pharmaceutical, they make medicine, you go to Walgreens, you get the medicine, right? But I didn't see all of the advocacy. I didn't see across the world the things that we do in the different markets where we're partnering with different academics and, research and things like that, and how much we really have impact on healthcare.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I'll say, I think I was surprised to learn that healthcare institutions can do a lot more than just treat our patients. We've actually been able to spearhead a few programs, such as like Better Health Through Housing, where some of our profits were able to actually like use to find some of our patients housing so that they can they don't have to come to the emergency room. We're able to help them find jobs, and so suddenly they can come in and see a primary care physician, be seen regularly and early so that it doesn't become an emergent case that is more expensive for us as a hospital, and is also more detrimental to their individual health. And so I was just surprised that like hospitals kind of have that ability, that leeway, and grateful that like that's one of the initiatives that like my hospital has done, that like to be at a hospital that cares enough and has like that mission focus to do that. And more so also just like we're expanding work on like social determinants of health. So like understanding, what aspects of an individual's upbringing or circumstances may be positively or negatively impacting their health, that is reducing, their health equity. And just like, so I'm learning a lot more about that, like right now. But like the fact that like we're invested into kind of gathering more of that data, analyzing it and trying to figure out how to better address it as an organization. And then also working with partner organizations in the Chicagoland area to not just make it our solution, but even broaden, the community that we're able to impact. So that was something I didn't really know about prior to this fellowship that has surprised me, but in a good way.
Absolutely, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I answer Celeste's question?
Yeah, I was just gonna put that question out there once you're done. Cool. So let's go ahead and move into Celeste's question actually. Did you ever struggle with indecisiveness or having more than one interest and having to choose between those interests? How do you deal with this and even the fear of wasting time? That's a big question. I love that question, Celeste.
But can I just answer it with one word? Maybe it's two words. Job shadow. So don't be scared to ask to shadow a position that you're interested in. So this could be a huge like field in terms of like, I want to shadow nursing, or I want to, but it could, or administration or lab, but it also, even if you have within that giant field a specific area, then you can even narrow it down and job shadow in that specific area. So most people don't know that if you just ask, often you can go to like an academic medical center and ask, or the hospital itself. If you just ask, you can often job shadow. So you may have to send a little bit of info on like who you are and what you're interested in. And, so they kind of have an idea of who you are, but it's a pretty common place to just say, I want to shadow a respiratory therapist for a half a day, or a medical lab scientist, or a healthcare administrator. You can absolutely shadow them and see if it's a good fit for you.
And we have another question. What has been the biggest obstacle to obtaining your education or pursuing your career, and how did you overcome it?
I could just chime in here. Is that one of some of the obstacles I had to overcome was being able to understand exactly what did I want to do. Even after I got my first role, I was still learning and homing in on my where I wanted to be in healthcare, right? And where I wanted to go in pharmaceutical. And one of the things is, again, I got that network. And I think Nadine mentioned about job shadowing. You can do that. Job shadow, go to an area, walk in somebody's shoes for a day. So I had to build that network to really find out what I want to do. And let me tell you, the area I'm in now, I had no experience in it, right? I was always on the R&D side of the business. And I had a coworker who encouraged me to apply for a role. And I received, I got the role, and it was like part of commercial, it's like a whole nother business. But if I never would have network to keep on plowing through, I would have never have thought about coming over to the commercial side, because I thought sales. So I was like, I'm not going to be selling. I'm not going, that's probably not me. But I didn't even know. And once I got over here, I'm like, oh no, the pretty building, the colors. Oh, I like the excitement of commercial. So that's one of the things, not really knowing where I can go to really get home in on that fit, but I overcame it by the power of my network.
And also, people will tell you no. They'll tell you you can't do something, and they'll tell you like you're not a good fit. And I think it was Cotis who mentioned sometimes you just have to have courage and determination and confidence to be like, no, this is a good fit for me, or I am doing this. Like, people will absolutely try to say no. Especially, I feel like sometimes if you are a little bit more of a go-getter and a little bit more aggressive about things, other people will get discouraged by that, or they'll feel threatened. And so you will maybe be told no often, and just, that's okay.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Cotis.
Can I jump on Denise's question as well? So I definitely get where that question is coming from. I was a first generation college student, and I went straight from Chicago to undergrad at Stanford University, studying chemical engineering. And so I felt this sense of this, like, do I belong here? This imposter syndrome, I think is what it's called. And so I think that was a big obstacle for me, was like, not only am I like 1,000 miles away from my family and like my support system that I grew up with, but I'm at, a top tier institution where there's all of this, there's this pressure, that's one of the most intense fields at the university. And so I was just like, can I do this? Should I be doing this throughout the entire 4 years? And so you kind of have to, rely on, your own sense of self and your own understanding of how smart you are, how you've earned your position, or you've earned, your place at your institution, and use that to power yourself through. I think that's what helped me, at least. So don't fall prey to imposter syndrome. A lot of people that you will be around, they may be facing it as well. But you are smart enough, and you have the skills and the tools to succeed wherever you've been chosen to go.
And I like to say, I love those responses, because I think, what was said, don't take no for an answer. And even if people, I think Nadine and Cotis said, is that, sometimes you will get discouraged because of what people say about you, but you have to know who you are. And remember, it's only one you, and but you can do what you do.
Absolutely. I want to thank you all. We're going to close out this session right here. For our guests, thank you so much, Nadine, Cotis, Chantel. Y'all have been amazing. Y'all have given these students such great advice and such just a wide brand of things like this. This was definitely for non-traditional careers, and y'all did it justice. I really appreciate it. For everyone here, please provide your thanks and your virtual applause, if you could, to our guest speakers. If you want to learn more about them, please go to the speaker session that is there. But we're actually going to close out this session so that we can go to the closing celebration or closing announcements and the raffle. Thank you all so much. Y'all have been doing such a great job, and answering all those questions were so amazing. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any other questions, or if you want to look at this session again, definitely be sure to come back, and you'll be able to see the recording. All right. So thank you all for your time, and you have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all at closing. Hopefully you won $50.